Prepare to be shocked to your core, dear viewer. I am an opinionated person.
No way!
One of the many, many hills I've elected to bury myself under is the idea that screen adaptations of video games are disasters waiting to happen. Despite this, the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie did pretty well way back in the forgotten yesteryear of 2023. Well enough at least to get a sequel. I mean, I never played the games as a kid when they were new, but I liked the first movie enough to spend the time between that release and this one getting more familiar with the source. The game, while fun, isn't the type of material from which you'd expect to extrapolate an Oscar-worthy suspense flick, and to be fair, that's not what you get with this installment, but stick around for a few minutes and I'll try to convince you to go see it just the same. Now, there will be spoilers for the first movie in this review, but you knew that. Who in their right mind would go watch a sequel in theaters without having first seen the original? Nevertheless, you've been warned, I guess. I won't include any real spoilers for the second, but I will be talking about the beginning to set up context for the rest of my thoughts. If you want to go into it blind, skip to this timestamp. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 picks up sometime after the events of the first movie as the town gears up for a local holiday called Fazfest to commemorate the beloved history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Abby has become a semi-adjusted middle schooler, but still misses her ghosty friends and is waiting on a promise her brother made to take her to see them again. Thing is though, Mike is lying through his teeth. He's ready to put the whole thing behind them and move forward in his life, including potentially starting a relationship with Vanessa, the cop/serial killer's daughter from the last movie who only turned code at the last possible second. So good for them. All is not well, however, because, well, I'll let the original film nerd explain.
The past is not at rest. Any sins you think were committed in the past are about to break out and destroy you.
So, like that time I spray painted Twilight Sparkle on my rival's van and then months later he figured it out and came after me with a tire iron? For you see, the last movie took place at a franchise location. This one takes our leads back to the original spot. An old employee named Michael, not to be confused with Mike of course, is giving a tour of the joint to a crew of ghost hunters, but he turns out to have ulterior motives. He wants to activate William Afton's earliest creation, the ghost of a girl named Charlotte shoved into an animatronic marionette, which has been locked up and spiraling alone for decades. Now, it wants revenge. Abby is determined to reunite with her paranormal pals one way or another. Vanessa is bogged down by visions of her late father, and stuck in the middle of it all is Mike, trying to keep what little balance he's been able to manufacture in their lives. Will he be able to, or will he and those closest to him wind up back in the fight? Let's start with the positives and work our way down, shall we? The rule of sequels is that you have to ramp up the spectacle to balance out probably quality declined writing. Here, this means that it will have to be more scarier and do so more often, which it achieves. I mean, it relies heavily on jump scares, but what more did you expect from Five Nights at Freddy's? Maybe this is just a me thing, but the marionette was always the spookiest part of the lore as far as I'm concerned, and the scenes where it puppets the human hosts are legit unnerving. What's nice is that it raises the ante on the horror aspect without devolving into gore and shock value, so you're clear to watch it with your family if you so desire. Obviously, it has a better production quality because it has a bigger budget, presumably because the first one did so well. Hollywood. But it still looks like it came out of the same franchise as the first one. Nice job, folks. And hey, for once, I'm not being sarcastic with that. The cast knows what's expected of them and delivers performances that are in line with what you'd expect from this movie. Hyper Rubio is a kid, so she gets some grace for the more wooden moments, but hey, the awkward tone kinda works for the character. As for the lead, Josh Hutcherson. Nuff said. Freddie Carter is a fantastic actor, and I can't speak for anybody else, but I haven't seen him in anything since Shadow and Bone, which, as someone who read the books, was not my favorite interpretation of events, but good grief, was he a good choice for Casbracker. He sells his scenes in this film like a student defending their thesis. Unfortunately, he only appears a handful of times, and I can't offer more context without spoiling it, but let's just say the movie would have benefited from giving him some more screen time. A big pitfall of video game adaptations is that it's difficult to incorporate game lore in an unobtrusive fashion. Well, I regret to report that Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is no exception. Skeet Ulrich has a cameo as what is very clearly an important character from the game, but they never get around to explaining this, so you're lost if you aren't familiar with it. These movies have rearranged a lot of the lore from the games, and in fairness, the games are pretty cryptic about what occurred when, but there is an established narrative that is being widely ignored. Look, some things are going to have to be changed to fit a square peg into a round hole, so try to take this movie for what it is and you'll have a good time. Of course, I have to at least give a cursory overview of the writing. The spread of the actors aging is a little weird to me. Josh Hutcherson is like 20 years older than his co-star, and I'm not saying it's impossible for that to be the case in-universe, but given what we know about their parents, it seems unlikely. Also, due to, the nature of reality, people keep aging in between movie shoots, so it's harder to believe Abby as an 11-year-old this time around. Skip forward a few more installments, which there surely will be, and we'll be seeing Piper Rubio in her 20s still playing a middle schooler. All to say that it would have been super easy to build a time skip into the script. That's not the biggest issue, though. The whole movie is a massive detour from the William Afton storyline, and I struggle to understand why. He's referenced a couple times, but it never goes anywhere beyond the understanding that the active villains of the movie are a direct result of his actions and maybe can't even be held accountable by that logic. I mean, you can't really expect perpetual children to act that mature, can you? The dialogue swings violently between in your face, uninformative, and actually useful, which makes it pretty hard to get invested in conversations if you understand how dialogue works at a structural level, or hey, even if you know how a human conversation works. Michael and Henry should have been better utilized. There was no point in retconning the death of Mike's aunt except to eliminate the idea that actions have consequences and thereby eliminating story stakes. The character of Jeremiah shouldn't exist at all. All he does is bail people out of situations they absolutely should not have gotten out of, which again pulls you right out of the story because you can see the stakes vanishing before your very eyes. The humor most definitely undercuts the tension at times, which isn't great from a critical standpoint even if you're trying to keep things from getting too dark for younger audiences. The story is kind of simple, yet somehow also veers off in too many directions at various points. Elements from the game are shoehorned into the narrative, which is jarring for fans of the game, confusing for people who are getting introduced to this stuff for the first time, and unnecessary for the writers. In a storytelling sense, at least. I'm sure they had producers breathing down their neck to include as much key jangling as possible. It's a movie that tried to add too many ingredients and lost some of them in the mix. It helps if you try to treat it as a separate entity from the games, but speaking for myself, I don't like to do that because adaptations do have an established name attached to them. There's an expectation that they should treat said name with respect. Ultimately, though, none of this detracts from your enjoyment of the film too much. I'm just picking it to death because that's what I'm here for. Not a soul on this planet expected it to be a pinnacle of filmmaking, least of all those behind the camera, and in some ways, I dare say it would have been worse if that had been the case. See, movies these days tend to fall into one of two categories. Either they're pretentious Oscar-baiting schlockfests that are trying too hard to end up saying nothing at all, or dime a dozen fluff pieces chucked into an unforgiving sea for whatever cash they can scrounge up. The mid-budget blockbuster is almost non-existent, especially now in the shadow of an unspecified merger of two certain film and TV production companies that begin with the letters N and WB. Pardon my sentimentality, but man, it's refreshing to see a movie that doesn't take itself deathly serious and isn't pushed to be expectation subverting. Believe it or not, I actually do like this film. It's a classic good old-fashioned jump scare thriller that'll keep you entertained for a couple of hours. It doesn't need to be anything more. If it seems like I'm going easy on this movie, then it's because I am. In a rare display of knowing their surroundings, Hollywood appears to have clocked the fact that the median age of this film's target audience is 14 and have planned accordingly. And guess what? It paid off. What do you know? It's almost as if aiming your movie toward a specific audience will allow you to tailor it to their preferences and make them want to spend their hard-earned money on it. Nah, there's no way that's it. By the close of opening weekend, it made north of $109 million. For context, that's more than twice the high estimate of its budget. I can't speak beyond my own experiences, but when I saw it, the theater was packed full and it was all applause when it was over, and while it was going, and before it started. I haven't seen so many people in one spot so eager to see a movie since The Force Awakens. Remember when the sequels were promising? Ah, simpler times. What I'm trying to say here is that whatever is true about the movie itself, it represents the wider idea that despite what studios and critics alike seem to be thinking as of late, cinema isn't dying. People still want to go see movies, just good ones. I want this movie to do well. I want it to do really well and blow past Predator Badlands and The Running Man and all the other pointless new additions and remakes. Apart from the concept of this of all things winning Movie of the Year being endlessly funny to me, I want to get it in Hollywood's head that they need to stop trying to be all things to all people with every release and just get back to telling decent stories, or please, if nothing else, entertaining ones. According to the typical online headlines that researched source Trust Me Bro, critics are lambasting this movie. Maybe so. But guess who hasn't seen a single negative review thus far? And if that is the case, I'd like to point them toward a line from Ratatouille. The bitter truth we critics must face is that, in the grand scheme of things, the average piece of junk is probably more meaningful than our criticism designating it so. Point of all this being, I've worked 2 overnight security jobs in the span of a year, and I still haven't gotten a ghost adventure. Where's my ghost adventure?